Reygan Ajay Moon was born on August 11, 2015 in Georgia. She was energetic, giggly, and loved rainbows. She smiled all of the time and danced to music every chance she got, and was always trying to get others to play with her. One of her methods was to stand on a box and pretend to be a preacher. Reygan was born with a few birth defects and medical conditions. She only had one kidney, one ovary, and half of a uterus. One of her legs was slightly shorter than the other, and she had an extra nail on her thumb. These weren't life-threatening conditions, and they could be corrected over time as she grew. She had an older sister, but the two didn't get a chance to develop a strong sibling bond.
Reygan was born to mother Devin Moon. Sources say she was hesitant about keeping her pregnancy, but ultimately went through with having her. Previously, Devin had given her older daughter to her mother Deborah's care. According to the family, this daughter had gained weight since living with her grandmother, and Devin openly expressed her dislike of overweight children. It wasn't long before Devin gave Reygan to another family member, which lasted for just under 2 years. This arrangement was informal, so she never signed any documents or went to court. While everything was peaceful for some time, the family member in question grew resentful. They believed that they shouldn't be the one caring for someone else's daughter when the mother was available to do so. Finally, out of frustration, Reygan was returned to her mother. That same day, they called the Department of Family and Child Services, which we will refer to as DFCS for the remainder of the video. They were worried that Devin potentially could not or would not care for Reygan. The caseworker responded and came to the conclusion that Reygan wasn't in any immediate danger. As she stayed with her mother, Reygan became small and frail. The change was so rapid, her extended family immediately took notice. One of her aunts said whenever Reygan ate, her stomach swelled and bloated. In April of 2017, Devin's mother Deborah took Reygan to the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta Eggleston Hospital. Reygan was underweight. She was only 20 pounds. Her follow-up visit in July didn't show any improvement. Worried for Reygan's safety, Deborah called DFCS, as did one of Devin's sisters. Devin confronted them over this. Angered, she barred her mother and sister from ever seeing Reygan. She walked this back in early October of 2017 when she needed a babysitter. Another sitter called out at the last minute, so Devin asked Deborah to watch Reygan for a while. Reygan hadn't put on any weight since Deborah last saw her. If anything, she was still noticeably smaller. Deborah rushed Reygan to the hospital, and the 2-year-old received treatment for malnourishment. DFCS stepped in again. They visited Reygan in her hospital room. They wrote in their report, and I quote, "The child's belly is very small, and she looks like a child on Feed the Children." For those unfamiliar, Feed the Children is a non-profit organization focused on childhood hunger. But despite DFCS clearly seeing what most of you would consider to be alarming red flags, they decided to do nothing except for returning Reygan to Devin's care.
The extended family called DFCS multiple times. 4 calls within a span of 1 month came from Deborah. After the final time, Deborah was told arrangements were made to monitor Reygan's care. A pediatric nutritionist was tasked with crafting Reygan's diet based on her needs and visiting once a week to make sure that Devin was following the instructions. Furthermore, DFCS noted that Devin was a potentially unreliable caregiver. She confided in a caseworker that she felt so overwhelmed trying to take care of Reygan that she had quit school. DFCS didn't know if Devin was working or if she had made arrangements for daycare for Reygan, but visits from DFCS were not nearly as thorough as the department presented them to be. One of these supposed visits was nothing more than a short text message exchange. Devin was asked to send a picture of Reygan, and the communication largely ended there. A caseworker noted during an in-person visit that Reygan looked small for her age but never made any follow-up visits. It's reported one of the documents was filed away with inconsistent notes, likely reducing Reygan's chances of receiving care.
After the final call in October of 2017, Devin went completely no contact with her family. The extended family went a full year without seeing Reygan. Deborah spoke with DFCS multiple times, asking to become Reygan's caregiver, to take her concerns seriously, and even just to see her. But they wouldn't budge. Devin took up residence in a 2-bedroom apartment in Lilburn, Georgia. She and Reygan would only live there for a few short months. Reygan's bedroom was completely unfurnished, while Devin's had furniture, clothes, and even a large television. Devin had a new job at a local adult-only club. While it has been speculated that she worked there as a dancer, this has not been confirmed. What is confirmed is that she spent up to 12 hours at work every night. Devin left Reygan alone and unattended during these shifts. 2-year-old Reygan was locked in her small bedroom closet without food, water, or a clean way to relieve herself for 12-hour stretches at a time. Devin still used the space for storage, making the space even smaller. Devin essentially threw Reygan in her closet as if she was an object she was quickly cleaning off her floor. Reygan died from starvation on July 24th, 2018. She was roughly 2 weeks shy of her 3rd birthday. Devin found her, she moved her to the couch. 911 was called at 3:29 in the afternoon. Reported Reygan was unresponsive and cold to the touch. The operator instructed Devin to place Reygan on the floor and perform CPR until help arrived. One neighbor heard screaming and looked outside. He gave his account to the local news.
It's undescribable when you're talking about a child.
Mark Reynolds is shocked and disturbed after finding out his neighbor was arrested for the death of her daughter.
Some woman just ran out the door screaming, they're dead, they're dead.
That person screaming was this woman, Devin Moon, who's facing cruelty to children and felony murder after Gwinnett County police say her nearly 3-year-old daughter was found dead in her apartment Tuesday afternoon, here at the Columns at Paxton Lane in Lilburn.
It's the worst kind of case that we deal with.
Gwinnett County Police Sergeant Jake Smith tells us Moon called 911 Tuesday afternoon, saying her toddler daughter Reygan was unresponsive and cold to the touch. Moon also said her daughter was born with medical issues that prevented her from gaining weight. But after an investigation, police learned that wasn't the case, discovering Moon would often leave her daughter alone overnight and that she died from malnutrition.
We believe that she worked at a club in Atlanta, and she would actually leave the daughter at home many nights a week, if not most nights, and she would leave in the afternoon and then not arrive back home until the early hours of the morning, so like 4 or 5 in the morning.
She claims to have saw Reygan on the couch and guessed she was asleep, so she let her be. Devin said she woke up at 2:30 p.m. and took out the garbage, claiming she checked on Reygan and saw that she wasn't moving.
Police Corporal Micah Hedgewood was in charge of the investigation. Reygan's body was covered with a bedsheet when he arrived, and he didn't immediately inspect the body. He interviewed Devin in the police car. Devin also brought up her mother and sister, explaining how they had cared for Reygan in the past. The officers were left with the false impression that Reygan was often under adult supervision when Devin had to work. Her story fell apart as they continued their investigation. When Corporal Hedgewood finally looked at Reygan's body, he suspected a neglect case. Reygan was extremely thin and dirty, like she hadn't been given a bath in days. She had so little muscle mass that it was hard for the medical examiner to determine how long ago Reygan had died. Corporal Hedgewood said that Reygan was so thin and frail that her wrinkled and dry skin looked like leather.
Devin was quick with excuses. She told the detectives that Reygan had a medical condition that made it hard for her to gain weight. This was a lie and the police assumed it was, but they couldn't arrest Devin without more evidence. Devin's mother and sister came to the apartment and spoke with the officer. Deborah detailed her past concerns about Reygan's health and well-being. Corporal Hedgewood learned about DFCS's involvement in Reygan's life, how they didn't return the family's calls, and that they hadn't seen Reygan since October of 2017. He was also provided pictures of Reygan taken before Devin cut contact with her family. While recognizable, the happy and healthy little girl in these photos was far from the emaciated child that they found in the apartment. Corporal Hedgewood told the family that she did not look like Reygan anymore. Investigators found human waste inside the home, notably within the bedroom closet. They determined that this was where Reygan must have died and that Devin moved her to try to cover her tracks. A medical examiner believed the couch would have been wet from fluids released post-mortem if Reygan had truly died while sleeping on the couch. They found Devin also lied about taking out the garbage. The trash can in the kitchen was empty, and according to Corporal Hedgewood, she did remove something from the apartment. But they combed through the top layer of the apartment's dumpster and didn't find any bags or contents that tied back to Devin. When they viewed the security footage, they saw Devin leave the apartment, return about 15 minutes later, and then saw police cars pull in. According to Corporal Hedgewood, it was very clear she could not have thrown something away in the apartment's dumpster during the time frame she originally claimed. An autopsy revealed how neglected Reygan was. It was only 14 pounds. Her cause of death was officially starvation and dehydration from neglect.
Corporal Hedgewood asked Devin to come to the Gwinnett County Police records for another interview. He asked about Reygan's diet. Devin reaffirmed that she was feeding her daughter. She said that the day before she called 911, Reygan had eaten 2 packets of instant grits in the morning and 12 chicken nuggets from McDonald's in the afternoon. Not only are those large portions for any child Reygan's age, but Devin's claims didn't match with Reygan's frail body. Devin was arrested and booked into the Gwinnett County Detention Center 2 days later on July 26th. Police seized Devin's cell phone records and found she made multiple calls to her ex around 2:30 p.m. When she couldn't get through to him, she left her apartment for about 15 minutes. She called the police after she returned.
Reygan's family was distraught. Deborah Walton Moon was one of the first to speak to the press. She said the following.
I'm just so heartbroken because it didn't have to happen this way. We took her to Eggleston because she was just skin and bone. And the hospital said, yeah, she weighs the same 20 pounds that she weighed when you brought her here in April. And she said to me, you called defects on me, didn't you? I said, I did. I said, only because I cared about you, cared about the baby. That's the only reason. She said, I hate you. I hate you. She said, you've lost a daughter and a granddaughter. And I have.
One of Reygan's aunts, Yolanda Walton Blessett, organized a GoFundMe on July 27th. These funds were to go towards Reygan's funeral services and to the care of her older sister. Yolanda wrote the following in the description. On August 11th, 2015, our family was blessed with the gift of our beautiful little Reygan. 2 years and 11 months later, just shy of her 3rd birthday, Reygan has been taken away from us because the system designed to protect her has ultimately failed her. Reygan was a petite ball of energy with a smile so bright it could light up the entire universe. Her laughter was contagious, and one couldn't help but to love on her anytime she was present. The loss of this child has cut our family to its very core, but more importantly has left Reygan's older sister lost and alone without a sibling she barely had time to get to know. As we prepare to make arrangements to celebrate Reygan's life, our family requests your prayers and asks that each of you consider contributing to this fund, which will assist us in laying her to rest. We thank you in advance for your thoughts, prayers, and contributions. May God bless you. DFCS responded publicly more than 3 weeks after Reygan's death. They released a report where they admitted they saw warning signs and ignored them. Keith Bostick, the then Deputy Director of Child Welfare, gave a press conference where he answered questions from journalists. He apologized for the department's failures and promised to make changes going forward. According to Director Bostick, DFCS caseworkers are primarily educated and trained in mental health, but in his words, not so much in physical health. Though I'm not sure what kind of training it takes to clearly see that a child is visibly malnourished. So it's possible when Devin told caseworkers Reygan was just small for her age, in Director Bostick's mind, they took her at her word. Director Bostick explained that offering new training to their caseworkers could help prevent child neglect cases in the future. He said, and I quote, "It was so horrific when I reviewed this case that it just kind of highlights the need for us to continue our efforts around prevention, our efforts around how we can perhaps provide services to families early on that can prevent things like what has occurred. As I look at this case, an added support and resource could be instructing our staff in the knowledge of medical neglect." But Reygan's family was not happy with this response. They wanted to see the department be held accountable for their negligence. They considered filing a lawsuit. They also wanted to establish a program to help protect children like Reygan. The individual caseworkers that worked with Reygan and her family were all gone. They all quit on their own after the final welfare call and before Reygan's death. Georgia DFCS reported that they were trying to track them down to interview them as part of their internal investigation. If they have been found, which I would find it hard to believe that they weren't, no one has said a word publicly about it. And as for Deputy Director Keith Bostick, he is no longer with Georgia DFCS, but despite everything that happened, he had no trouble gaining a position a year after Reygan's death as the Division Director for Family and Children's Services in Santa Cruz County, California. Currently, he is the Deputy Director for Human Services in Broward County, Florida.
Reygan's funeral was held on August 4th, 2018 at the Salem Missionary Baptist Church. As she loved rainbows and bright colors, her family asked that everyone in attendance wear vibrant, colorful attire instead of all black. Her aunt Angel Walton said, "It was more of a celebration of her life and joy. It was beautiful." Angel Walton further shared that Reygan always smiled. She liked posing for the camera. She would have been dancing with the music. She would have been trying to play. She likes to stand on boxes and preach a little bit. Deborah said she had seen rainbows in the Georgia sky and she would be reminded of Reygan. She would stay in place and talk to the rainbow as if Reygan was listening. And when she had said all that she needed to, the rainbow would fade.
Devin was held without bond, not that it seemed like she had any friends or family members who were willing to pay her bail anyways. Corporal Hedgewood testified during the pretrial hearing detailing his findings. The testimony was filmed and published on Facebook by Atlanta-based news channel 11 Alive. The comments are understandably emotionally charged, expressing regret for Reygan's death and anger at Devin for her negligence. There are two that stand out. The users talk about their experience with Devin herself. Comments read, "Used to work with Devin at Walgreens and she was not a good person at all. Terrible spirit and attitude." And "Lord have mercy, I grew up with her. She was sweet. I mean super sweet. We went to church together, sang in the choir, went to summer camp. SMH."
Devin Moon's trial was delayed due to a county-wide scandal. Judge Catherine Schrader was assigned to many upcoming cases, including Devin's, but she herself was suspended from her position and made a defendant. Judge Schrader believed that Gwinnett County District Attorney Danny Porter had hacked into her work computer. Now, rather than going to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation for help, she turned to private detective TJ Ward. He then brought in Frank Carrick, a former deputy sheriff and a computer security expert under his employ. Judge Schrader gave permission for Frank Carrick to install surveillance software on her work computer. They remotely gathered data and sent it to Ward's forensic analyst, Edward Kramer. Now, Edward Kramer is a disgraced figure in the state of Georgia and is known for being one of the co-founders of the Atlanta pop culture convention Dragon Con and for his numerous charges for child SA. Judge Schrader claimed she wanted more proof of the DA's hack before going to the GBI. This proof was supposedly almost all ready until Edward Kramer was arrested for CSAM possession in February of 2019.
A motion was filed on March 29, 2019 that questioned Judge Schrader's impartiality. Attorney Samuel R. D'Entremont of the Gwinnett Judicial Circuit represented a Georgia man named Victor Briscato Jr. He expressed concerns of the judge's impartiality. He wrote, "This motion and affidavit allege facts which, if assumed to be true, would warrant Judge Schrader's recusal in order to preserve the impartiality of this court. Judge Schrader engaged in a pattern of allegations and behavior that evince a clear appearance of bias and distrust. The state asserts that these facts alone should be sufficient to cause Judge Schrader to voluntarily recuse herself from this case. Victor Briscato Jr. and all other pending and future cases involving District Attorney Porter during his tenure as Gwinnett County's District Attorney, at minimum, the facts set forth in this motion and affidavit are sufficient for the matter to be referred to another judge for an evidentiary hearing. Should Judge Schrader not voluntarily recuse herself in accordance with the Code of Judicial Conduct, the state respectfully requests that this matter be referred to another judge to conduct a hearing into the allegations set forth in this motion and affidavit and render a decision as to whether Judge Schrader should be recused." Following the motion, Judge Schrader was taken to trial. She was removed from her assigned criminal cases before she was suspended completely from her position. One of the trials she was previously meant to preside over involved none other than Devin Moon.
Georgia-based press outlets drew comparisons between Reygan and another child, Amani Moss. We covered the death of Amani Moss in 2023, and we'll be sure to link our coverage in the pinned comment. In short, Amani Moss was victimized by her father, Aman, and her stepmother, Tiffany, while her half-siblings were treated favorably. Her grandmother spoke with DFCS multiple times, fearful for Amani's safety, but they ignored her. Amani died of starvation in her home on October 29, 2013. She was only 10 years old. Tiffany and Amon tried to cover up her death, even lying to the police, but were found out and arrested. In 2015, Amon got life in prison instead of the death penalty in exchange for testifying against Tiffany. Tiffany was given the death penalty in 2019, 6 years after Amani died. Reygan and Amani were both Georgia girls neglected to the point of dying from starvation. Devin and Tiffany both tried to cover up their tracks. Both girls' grandparents were willing and ready to become their granddaughter's caregivers. If allowed to live with their grandparents, and if DFCS did their due diligence, Reygan and Amani would likely still be alive today. It's difficult in the state of Georgia for grandparents to gain custody of their grandchildren, even if there are concerns about a child's safety and well-being. New Georgia legislation from 2024 made it easier for grandparents to file for custody of their grandchildren. At this time, however, the parents need to voluntarily give up their parental rights.
Like most child protection agencies in the United States, Georgia DFCS is notoriously understaffed and underfunded. Even before the 2020 pandemic, it had an inconsistent reputation across the state. In February of 2023, Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff launched an investigation into DFCS. The investigation found children under their care were not being treated with any sense of dignity or decency. Many of these children came from dangerous homes where they were victims of harm and neglect. Probably what's most alarming from this investigation is that between 2018 and 2022, over 1,700 Georgia children in the state's care were reported missing. No, this isn't some conspiracy theory. In a matter of 4 years, over 1,700 children who were in the care of Georgia DFCS were reported missing. And at the request of Senator Ossoff's office, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children conducted their own review and found nearly 2,500 instances of Georgia foster children being reported missing during a 5-year span. That's a missing foster child every day in Georgia alone. In October, Senator Ossoff presided over the first of 4 human rights hearings against DFCS. Witnesses from various organizations such as the FBI, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and the Department of Health and Human Services were called to testify during these hearings about DFCS's various oversights. Then, in April of 2024, the Senate Judiciary Committee released a case study detailing the culmination of the investigation's findings. There were 8 key points listed in the case report, such as mismanagement at DFCS is a key contributor to child deaths and serious injuries. DFCS consistently fails to meet children's physical and mental health needs. DFCS fails to adhere to its own protocols regarding administration of psychotropic drugs for children. DHS publicly dismissed OCA's 2022 report of systemic child safety failures without conducting a full and fair investigation. The full digital document is publicly available through Senator Jon Ossoff's website. Following the publication, the senator said, "The most vulnerable children in our state and in our nation must be protected from physical abuse, from sexual abuse, and from human trafficking. We cannot and must not look away from these findings, though they are deeply distressing. We cannot accept the abuse, the trafficking, and the preventable death of children. I thank my subcommittee staff and the more than 100 witnesses whose hard work and courage has brought these facts to the public." DA Danny Porter lost the vote for re-election in 2020. Was replaced by Patsy Austin Gatson. She said in 2021 she aims to see resolutions to cases that were awaiting trial for too long, but she was met with some roadblocks that halted her progress. Many of Porter's former staff resigned after the election, leaving many vacant positions. In addition, Austin Gatson went into office while pandemic restrictions were still active. Once the DA's office filled their positions and got to work, many unresolved homicide cases were taken to trial. Loved ones of these homicide victims were very grateful for Patsy Austin Gatson's work as the district attorney. She is still in office as of this episode. However, she has not made any comments about Reygan or Devin Moon specifically. And as of the date of this recording, Devin Moon has still not gone to trial. Because of that, she is innocent until proven guilty within a court of law.
There aren't any updates regarding Devin Moon's trial as of September of 2025. Tiffany Moss was arrested in 2013, but didn't go to trial until 2019. There are also a long list of cases on the backlog, with even more coming in every day. Devin may also find herself waiting a long time before she is read a verdict and a sentence. Reygan's father's identity is still unknown to the public. He hasn't said a word to the press or to the courts about his daughter. Reygan's family hasn't spoken about him either. He might make an appearance during Devon's trial should the attorneys find him and decide he has anything interesting or important to say. In February of 2025, Senator Ossoff worked alongside Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn to create the Gracie Act, generate recordings of all child protective interviews everywhere. If passed, the bill would create a new grant program to cover the cost of recording and storing child welfare interviews. States would qualify if their laws require all CPS-related interviews to be recorded in audio or video form. State departments like DFCS would be able to reshuffle their budgets to areas that lack in funds. Mainstream media outlets haven't reported on Reygan's death past 2020. The Facebook group Black Kids Haven made a post in August of this year, spreading awareness of Reygan's death to a new audience. When this episode goes live, we hope we can do the same. Reygan should be 10 years old today. She could have been making friends in school, spending time with her older sister, joining extracurricular groups, and navigating the world alongside the people who loved her. While we are no stranger to children taken too soon, each headline is still as tragic as the last. Reygan was robbed of the gift of life, and her absence gives many, many people a hole they'll never be able to fill.